The hero party has successfully sealed the Demon Lord away. While this marks a monumental triumph, the danger isn't entirely over unless they manage to defeat him completely. The world will remain under threat of annihilation. The group is weighed down by guilt for failing to finish their mission, but their leader reassures them that all hope is not lost. He firmly believes that, one day in the future, a new hero will rise to continue their legacy and finally put an end to the Demon Lord for good. Several years later, the rank party Thunderpike is in the middle of a public dungeon raid. While the two fighters attack, the magic users begin casting their spells, and thanks to the buffs from the party's supporter, Yuka, they are able to take a Hydra down in record time. Individually, the members of Thunderpike are already really strong, but when they work together, they are nearly unbeatable, which is part of the reason why they have so many fans. However, although they might appear to be the perfect team on the surface, it turns out they don't get along as well as you might think. In fact, once the stream wraps up, the Red Mage, Yuka, informs the team that he's leaving Thunderpike effective immediately. The party leader, Simon, questions why he's choosing to quit, and Yuka explains that he isn't receiving a fair share of their reward money. The amount he got today is so small that he might have to consider taking out payday loans, a situation he's determined to avoid. Simon tries to justify Yuka's low pay by claiming that Yuka isn't contributing enough to the party, and Barry chimes in to point out that Yuka never actually engages in any battles. All he ever does is burn through their items' durability with his pointless enchantments. Yuka can't believe Barry would call his enchantments useless. But Barry isn't the only one who feels that way. The only one who actually thinks Yuka is useful is Jamie, but that's just because he's good at setting up their streams. Camilla tells Yuka that if he wants to earn more, he needs to contribute more actively as a team member. However, Yuka disagrees, arguing that she doesn't have the right to say that since she's a healer, and he's constantly protecting her during battles. He believes the lack of appreciation for his efforts is exactly why he's decided to leave the party. But Simon questions whether Yuka is truly confident he can manage on his own after leaving. Simon reminds him that the only reason Yuka even holds a B rank is because they are childhood friends, and Simon did him a favor by allowing him to join Thunderpike. He also points out that even if Yuka leaves, the team will get along just fine without him, since they clearly don't think Yuka deserves to be paid well. Yuka definitely isn't going to stick around. Yuka has wasted the last 5 years of his life supporting this party, and they would never have gotten this far without his help. But the others still all think he's useless, so they won't miss him at all. Now that Yuka has officially left Thunderpike, he makes his way to the guild receptionist to inquire about any available work. She's surprised to see a well-known adventurer like him looking for a job and asks if something happened with Thunderpike. Yuka explains that he's quit the team. The receptionist doesn't seem particularly shocked, as situations like this are fairly common, and hands Yuka a form to fill out so she can assign him to a new party. Once he's done filling out the form, he hands it to the receptionist. But just then, a girl comes running up to him for a big hug. The girl's name is Marina, and she used to be one of Yuka's students back when he taught preliminary adventure classes half a year ago. Yuka is glad she's doing all right. She's curious about why Yuka is here, so she asks him, and he tells her that he's currently looking for a new party since he recently left Thunderpike. Marina doesn't even let Yuka finish his sentence because if he's searching for a new party, she would absolutely love to have her beloved teacher join hers. Yuka agrees to her offer, and a few minutes later, he's seated with Marina and the rest of her party to discuss the possibility of him joining. Silk is thrilled about the idea of Yuka becoming part of their group, but she's surprised that such an experienced adventurer would want to join a D rank party like theirs. Yuka is currently B rank, so he could probably get into a much better party, but he doesn't mind being in a D rank party, and to be honest, he actually prefers it this way. Back when he was in Thunderpike, they would always take on high-level missions, so Yuka would have to buy a ton of magic items to prepare, which left him in constant debt. That's why he wants to take it easy for a while and just deal with some low-level quests instead. with Marina, Silk, and Rain all agreeing to the idea. Yuka officially becomes a member of their party. Their first mission together is to gather magic iron ore from the Paintal Mine dungeon. It's been a long time since Yuka has felt this kind of excitement about a mission, and it brings back many nostalgic memories from his early days as an adventurer. Yuka recalls that this dungeon has a lot of magic ore on the 6th floor, and Silk tells him he is correct, but they were hoping to avoid fighting the 5th floor boss. So Yuka suggests they should start on the 4th floor instead. As they enter the dungeon, Marina takes the lead and uses a stick to check for any traps that may have been set. Yuka is so proud because she's doing it exactly how he taught her. For now, Yuka asks Marina to let him take the lead, explaining that he has a more efficient way to handle the situation. Marina is confused, as their party doesn't have a scout or thief to detect traps. While that's true, Yuka reveals that he has a magic item that can help in this scenario. It's a detection lamp, which, thanks to a special type of oil, illuminates traps, allowing them to spot them just as effectively as a scout would. The lamp really is useful, but Silk asks if it's okay for Yuka to be using it since special oil sounds really expensive, and yes, it normally is. But Yuka made this oil with his alchemy, so it didn't cost him much. The party continues walking down the corridor while carefully avoiding all the traps until eventually Yuka stops everyone because he can sense something ahead. He warns the others, advising them to get ready for a fight. Together, they charge in and come face to face with a group of boggles. Silk decides to take the initiative and fires the first shot to take one of the boggles down, while Marina runs in to hammer the rest. As she does this, Yuka casts overlapping physical enchantments on her so she can fight better, and at the same time, he casts a debuff on the boggles to trip them up. While the boggles are disoriented, Marina goes in for her attack, and in one fluid motion, she's able to cut both of them in half, something even she is surprised by. She turns around to ask Yuka if that feeling she just experienced was his magic. Yuka confirms that he had cast 3 types of enchantments on Marina to help with her fight. Rain is amazed that Yuka managed to cast 3 enchantments simultaneously, and without even using an incantation. However, Yuka doesn't think it's anything special, and simply tells them they should keep moving. As they make their way deeper into the mine, he asks the girls about their usual routine for dungeon exploration. Marina, beaming with pride, explains that they always take a break after each floor and inspect their equipment, just as he had taught them. Hearing this, Yuka suggests they rest for a while before continuing. After their break, Marina and the others check all their equipment for damage, and everything seems to be in working order. So, they are ready to continue their mission and head down to the next floor. On the 2nd floor of the dungeon, the group is suddenly ambushed by a group of undead miners, and the only way to get rid of them is for Rain to use holy magic. Everyone needs to protect her while she uses her chant. Marina and Silk plan to handle the defense, but Yuka tells them he has this covered. He casts a blessing of light on all of them, and while it won't kill the undead miners, it does stop them from coming closer, so it's a good defensive measure. Eventually, Rain completes the holy light spell, using it to eradicate the undead. Once they're safe, Marina begins praising Rain for a job well done. Yuka also commends her, pointing out that very few people can wield light magic on the scale she just demonstrated. However, casting such a powerful spell likely consumed a significant amount of her mana, so Yuka casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Rain is astonished that Yuka can use Refresh Mana, a rare skill that fully restores the mana of whoever it's cast on. She notes that possessing such a skill alone would make Yuka incredibly valuable to any party, but Yuka downplays her reaction, explaining that he only learned Refresh Mana to make up for having an obscure job like a red mage, though mastering it had been exceptionally difficult for him. Afterward, the group continues walking down the path, and as they go, Yuka begins pouring a liquid on the ground. Silk asks him what he's doing, so Yuka explains that he is pouring holy water over their footprints to stop undead monsters from following them. Silk is worried and asks if it's really okay for him to waste his holy water like that since it's really expensive, but Yuka tells her it's fine since, once again, he made this himself. The group is in shock that Yuka is able to make holy water even though he isn't a priest, but he has a special method for it. by purifying the ashes left behind by the undead when they are defeated. Yuka is able to process it into holy water, and the ashes he got from the undead miners will be more than enough to make up for the amount of holy water he's using. By the time they reach the 3rd floor, Yuka suggests taking another break since they'll be starting the mining process from this point onward. Noticing that it's been a while since they last ate, he pulls out some cooking utensils from his magic bag and announces that he'll prepare a meal for them. While magic bags aren't particularly rare, this is Rain's first time seeing one in person, and she's visibly excited. Yuka places some sausage and eggs in a pan, and as they cook, he retrieves a special pot from the bag. The girls watch as he taps on the side of the pot, and it instantly fills up. Yuka explains that the pot is a rare artifact that he found in a royal palace ruin. It basically fills up with a random soup every time you use it, so it's really handy to have. The girls are really grateful to Yuka since this is the first time they've gotten to have such a good meal while in the middle of a dungeon mission. But when Silk takes a closer look at the food, she realizes that it has mana radiating out of it. She asks Yuka about it, but he tells her there's nothing special about the food since all he did was prepare it with lots of love. His alchemy skills might have accidentally enchanted the food. However, it shouldn't be a problem. The group finally reaches the 4th floor of the dungeon, where they are confronted by a rock lizard. As the monster charges toward them, Yuka casts a slow spell, causing it to nearly freeze in place. Seizing the opportunity, Marina charges forward to attack a move she wouldn't normally attempt. However, with Yuka's enchantments enhancing her strength and stamina, she decides to use her magic blade ability. With a single, decisive strike, she slices off the rock lizard's head. Once the fight is over, Marina is totally exhausted since Magic Blade uses up a ton of her mana. But Yuka encourages her to keep using it as much as possible because eventually her body will get used to it. But for now, he casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Anyway, there were a lot of magic ores here, so Yuka begins mining with the girls. After a little while, they manage to gather a ton of magic ores. Yuka asks if they've collected enough to meet the requirements of their quest, but Silk replies that they still need a bit more. Unfortunately, there aren't any more magic ores left on this floor, leaving them with only one option: defeat the 5th floor boss and descend to the 6th floor to gather the remaining ores. The girls are uneasy about this plan, as the 5th floor boss is the steel crab, and they're unsure if they can survive against such a formidable foe. However, Yuka reassures them not to worry, promising to handle the boss himself to the best of his ability. A little while later, they arrive at the boss's room, but before they head in, Yuka pulls out a camera artifact. Rain recognizes the artifact and asks if Yuka plans to live stream his battle, but he was actually just going to record it instead. He always records his battles so he can study his mistakes later. If he's going to be recording anyway, Marina asks him to make it a live stream since she thinks it will be a lot of fun. Yuka agrees to live stream his fight, but as he's setting it up, he realizes he doesn't know the name of their party. He asks the others, and Silk admits they haven't actually come up with a party name yet. In fact, they aren't even officially registered. Hearing this, Yuka asks if they have any ideas for a team name. Marina thinks for a moment before suggesting the name Clover, specifically a 4-leaf clover to symbolize their 4 members. Everyone loves the idea, and from that moment on, they decide to be known as Clover. Just then, Yuka realizes that this is going to be her party's first live stream, and he'd feel bad if he was the only one in the spotlight. So, he asks the others if they want to help him fight the boss, but they all tell him that it's fine for him to handle it solo. In that case, Yuka isn't going to hold back. He casts Great Blink Shadow and Protector Shield buffs on himself and then enters the boss room. The steel crab awakens and immediately lunges at Yuka, but he uses his speed buffs to swiftly dodge the attack. Once he's safely out of its range, he begins bombarding the crab with a series of debuff spells. After sufficiently weakening it, Yuka casts a gravity spell, slamming the steel crab against the floor and crushing it. With that, the boss is defeated, and it didn't even take him a full minute. Yuka feels quite satisfied with his performance. He then ends the stream, and Marina runs up to hug him for being so amazing, but she's hugging him a little too hard. The others ask her to let go before Yuka ends up in a wheelchair. After making sure his back is fine, Yuka tells everyone that they should bring the steel crab's body back to the guild so they can sell the parts. He stores the entire thing in his magic bag, which is a huge help since they never would have been able to carry it back by themselves. So far, Yuka has proven to be an invaluable asset to their party, but Silk feels it's unfair for them to rely on him so heavily. In response, Yuka suggests that during their next boss battle, everyone should participate to gain some experience. The girls like the idea, but for now, they still need to open the treasure chest they earned for defeating the floor boss. When they open the chest, they discover a large stash of magic ores, meaning they won't have to do any more mining after all. Dungeon streams are incredibly popular worldwide, serving as an excellent platform for publicity. Major companies frequently offer sponsorship deals to well-known streamers, and right now, Yuka's fame is soaring to new heights. The video showcasing his triumph over the steel crab, using only status effect spells, has gone viral, drawing massive attention. As Yuka and his companions make their way back home in the carriage, he takes a moment to ask them about their impressions of their first mission together. The girls are thrilled. They absolutely loved the experience. They picked up all sorts of amazing skills and insights from Yuka, making this their most rewarding mission yet. In fact, they've been seriously considering naming Yuka as the official leader of their party. With his extensive experience and the unwavering trust they've placed in him as their mentor, it feels like a natural decision for the group. Yuka feels reluctant to take on the role, as he never intended to lead Marina's party. However, since everyone insists that they want him to step up, he ultimately agrees, mainly to ensure their safety in future battles. While Yuka's group is busy celebrating their first victory, things are going downhill fast for Thunder Pike. Simon, trying to fill the gap left by Yuka's departure, hired a new recruit. Unfortunately, it seems Simon still hasn't grasped just how much Yuka contributed to the team. The new guy led the group straight into wolf territory, assuming everything would somehow work out. Normally, Yuka would have already cast a weakening spell on the wolves to level the playing field, but the replacement lacks that ability, leaving the wolves far too powerful for the party to handle. Jami ends up getting bitten. Simon sees Jami in danger and immediately rushes to her rescue, managing to decapitate the wolf. While Jami is technically out of immediate harm, her stomach is riddled with wounds, and without treatment, she won't survive for long. Desperate, Simon turns to Camilla and asks her to cast a healing spell, but she explains that she's completely out of mana, leaving her unable to help. After all, it's not like they had a guide capable of casting a mana restoration spell. The group retreats to a safer spot, and Simon does his best to administer first aid, trying to keep Jami alive while waiting for Camilla's mana to replenish. Hoping for another solution, he asks if anyone has a healing potion. Cork, the new recruit, happens to have one, but he hesitates to hand it over. Simon had made it abundantly clear that everyone was responsible for purchasing their own gear, so Cork doesn't feel particularly inclined to share his supplies. Simon tells him that now is not the time to be worrying about money when one of his teammates is about to die, so Cork reluctantly hands over the healing potion, and Simon feeds it to Jami. Thunder Pike has really been on a downward spiral lately, but on the flip side, everything has been working out for Yuka. He and the girls are sitting at the bar to celebrate, and while the reward for their quest wasn't that high, the steel crab's body was in good condition, so the guild paid a good price for it. Speaking of money, Yuka asks Marina and the others what system they've been using to split up the party's earnings. They explain to Yuka that Silk is the one who manages all the party's money, with each member receiving a set allowance. Yuka is a bit surprised, as it's uncommon for an entire group to entrust their finances to a single person, but the group has a clear reason for this arrangement. They've all been diligently saving to eventually buy a house together, as constantly renting rooms at the inn feels awkward in the long term. Understanding their goal, Yuka assures them that he's fine with continuing the allowance system. Silk, a little taken aback, asks if he's really okay with her managing all the finances, thinking that an adventurer like him might prefer handling his own money. However, Yuka reassures her that he trusts her completely, so there's no need to change a system that's already working for them. While Yuka and the others are having fun and getting along, Simon and the rest of Thunder Pike are upset because that was the worst outcome they've had in years. Thankfully, Thankfully, they were able to save Jami's life, but things could have gone really badly, and Simon blames it all on Cork. The rest of the party joins in and starts calling Cork useless for not being able to get them out of that mess. But Cork isn't going to let them put the blame on him, since everyone knows that dire wolves track their prey through scent, so it's common sense to buy a beast repellent in preparation for the mission. The situation was clearly the party's fault for not being properly prepared, but Simon tries to shift the blame onto Cork. He argues that if Cork knew about the beast repellent, he should have told them, and even goes as far as to claim that Jami almost dying is entirely Cork's fault for not buying beast repellent for everyone. The level of gaslighting is intense, but fortunately, it doesn't fool Cork. Realizing he wants nothing to do with a group where no one takes responsibility for their own mistakes, he decides to quit the party on the spot. Yuka overhears this, and he can't believe Thunder Pike still hasn't learned from their mistakes, but that doesn't concern him anymore. He turns back to the girls, and Marina tells everyone what they should do for tomorrow. Silk remembers something Yuka once told her about it being important to take a day off after every mission, so she suggests that they do that. Everyone agrees, and since Yuka is going to have the day off, he decides to get a little shopping done. He needs to stock up on potions and scrolls, and he still needs to turn those undead ashes he got into holy water so he can replenish his stock. He's going to be busy for a while, so he suggests that they all meet back up here after their break is over. At that moment, Marina notices that the day's dungeon stream highlights are being broadcast, and Yuka's fight against the steel crab has taken the #1 spot. Yuka is stunned, as he only uploaded the footage a few hours ago, but it's already garnered over 6,000 viewers, with the numbers still climbing. Viewers are fascinated by how someone with a lesser-known job like a red mage was able to defeat a steel crab without even laying a finger on it. The announcers urge everyone to watch out for Yuka and his party. Clover, hinting that they could potentially rise to become the world's greatest adventuring team. Simon and the other members of Thunder Pike see Yuka's stream as well, and they are all incredibly jealous that Yuka is actually doing well without them. But they still refuse to admit that Yuka might have been more useful to them than they gave him credit for. Thunder Pike is always going to be a bunch of haters, but it looks like there is actually someone else hating on Yuka from a distance, and he seems mad that Yuka is getting comfortable with his new party. A few days later, Yuka finds himself back at the guild, scanning the notice board for quests that might suit the girls. Noticing his indecision, the receptionist approaches and asks if she can assist him. Yuka explains that he's looking for quests that are simple enough for a group of beginners but still offer a decent payout. The receptionist chuckles and tells him he's being a bit too optimistic. Such a perfect quest doesn't really exist. Still, considering his situation, she recommends a C-rank quest involving the collection of magic stones from the Orden Lakeside Forest. Yuka thinks this just might work, but he's a little curious as to why the quest is C-rank when fetching magic stones is usually only D-rank. The receptionist explains that there has been a large magical beast sighted near the forest, so this quest is slightly more dangerous than normal. Just then, Marina enters the guild, and as soon as she hears the word quest, she immediately yells that their party will accept it. Yuka asks her to at least let him finish explaining before she agrees to do the quest, but Marina says she doesn't need to know the details since if Yuka thinks they can handle it, then she is sure they'll be able to get it done. It shouldn't be too hard anyway since she and the others have done a quest in that forest before. However, she doesn't understand why this quest would be C rank when all the other quests are D rank. Yuka then speaks up, explaining that the quest is classified as C rank because a magical beast has recently been spotted in the forest. Hearing this makes the girls hesitate, questioning whether they should take on the quest after all. However, they ultimately decide to go for it, reasoning that as long as Yuka is with them, everything will turn out fine. With that settled, Yuka instructs them to prepare their items and meet him an hour later at the stagecoach so they can head to the forest. Just as they're wrapping up, the receptionist returns with the quest receipt, and something about the timing feels a little too convenient. Yuka questions whether the receptionist orchestrated this outcome, and she doesn't deny having a hand in it. She points out that the stream Yuka made yesterday earned over 10,000 views, and now everyone is eager to see what he'll do next. Embarrassed, Yuka admits he hadn't expected his stream to gain so much attention. He sees no harm in continuing to stream his fights since it'll bring attention to the girls, and if they happen to find that magical beast, having it on on video would be great for the guild's records. While Yuka was talking about all this, the man from before is getting more and more infuriated. As Yuka leaves the guild, the man follows him. Yuka immediately realizes that he's being followed since the guy is doing a terrible job at it, so he ducks into an alleyway to get away. He was hoping to lose his stalker, but for a fat guy, he is pretty quick and catches up to Yuka. Yuka asks him if he has any business with him, so the man demands that Yuka quit Clover immediately. Yuka obviously says that's not going to happen, especially since he's the leader of the party. The man can't believe the girls made Yuka their leader after just one day together, especially when he'd begged to join their party countless times, only to be rejected. Yuka quickly pieces together the situation. This guy clearly wanted to form a harem of cute adventurer girls, but Marina and the others refused to let him join. Now, seeing someone else living his dream has made him lose his cool. Frustrated, the man draws his sword, threatening to attack unless Yuka agrees to leave the girls' party. Staying calm, Yuka quietly casts a snare trap at the man's feet and begins walking away. True to form, the man attempts to strike Yuka as he leaves, but the trap activates, causing him to slip and fall flat on the ground. Once Yuka boards the carriage, he casually tells the girls about his strange encounter. They recognize the guy as Besio and tell Yuka that the guy has been trying to join their party for so long. They ask if Yuka is alright since they would hate it if something bad were to happen to him because of them. But Yuka assures them it's not their fault. Besides, he left that guy unconscious in the middle of the street, so they can just report him when they get back to town. In the meantime, before they get to their destination, Yuka wants to go over their mission objective one last time. They are going to fetch 3 magic stones from the Orden Forest, and since the others say they've been here before, he asks them what it was like when they got here. According to Marina, they had been here 2 months ago, but now that she thinks about it, she didn't run into any monsters at all. After hearing this, Yuka concludes that the magical beast must have already been in the forest 2 months ago. He decides that if they encounter it, he'll live stream the fight. This way, the guild will gain valuable information about the creature, and if they can't defeat it, they'll have an easy way to call for backup. Once they arrive at the forest, Yuka starts the stream, and the group begins making their way through the dense terrain. Yuka chooses to take up the position of rear guard, reasoning that beasts often attack from behind. Concerned, Marina asks if it's really safe for him to stay at the rear, given that it's the most dangerous spot. Yuka reassures her, explaining that he has blink step to escape if things get dire, and that his clothes are equipped with excellent defense stats, allowing him to take a few hits before going down. They soon reach the waterfall where they are meant to gather the magic stone, but just before they can get there, Yuka tells everyone to wait because he can sense something coming. The magic beast finally reveals itself, but all the confidence Yuka had earlier goes out the window because that thing is a high-level monster that's usually only found in the deepest parts of the dungeon. It's Zarnag. The girls are nowhere near strong enough to handle this thing or even survive a minute against it, so Yuka gets in front of them and tells Silk to lead the others back to the Adventurers Guild and get backup while he holds this thing off here. However, the girls know that Yuka doesn't stand a chance against that thing either if he is fighting solo, so they refuse to leave his side. Otherwise, he might really die. Yuka can't argue with their determination, so he agrees to let them fight alongside him and quickly casts enchantment spells on the group. He and Marina take the front line, with Marina charging in first. However, the Zarnag effortlessly swats her aside like she's nothing. Yuka attempts to use his layered status effects on the beast. While it manages to disorient the Zarnag slightly, it doesn't deal much damage, leaving him with few viable options. With no other choice, Yuka decides to bet everything on one powerful move. However, he needs time to cast the spell, so he asks Marina to keep the monster distracted. Marina agrees and gets up close to the Zarnag, doing her best to hold its attention while dodging its attacks. When she's about to be caught, Silk and Rain step in with their magic to assist, ensuring she stays in the fight long enough for Yuka to finish his spell. Thanks to their teamwork, Yuka has enough time to complete the level 5 spell, a devastating prismatic missile. With the spell fully charged, he launches it directly at the beast's face. When the prismatic missile strikes, it initially seems like it didn't have much effect, However, moments later, the monster starts coughing up blood, revealing it has been severely wounded. Rain follows up by casting a grade 5 thunderbolt spell, electrocuting the creature. While it's paralyzed, Yuka commands Marina to decapitate it. Marina charges forward, activating her magic sword, while Yuka enhances her with a critical attack spell. Thanks to this, Marina manages to sever the monster's head from its body with a single powerful swing. Now that it's all finally over, Yuka drops to his knees in relief, overwhelmed that they managed to take down the monster without losing anyone. Meanwhile, back in town, the spectators watching the stream are just as astonished, particularly by the spell Yuka used, since no one has ever witnessed anything like it before. Of course, Simon is watching the stream, and he doesn't look that happy. Back in the forest, Yuka feels slightly lightheaded from all the mana he expended during the fight, but overall, he's still in decent shape. He's relieved that everything turned out fine, though he knows that battle was far too intense for a group of beginners like them. The only reason they survived was sheer luck. He warns the girls that he plans to scold them later for their reckless actions, but the girls argue that Yuka was just as reckless, charging into battle alone and fully prepared to sacrifice himself, and they find that kind of behavior completely unacceptable. Yuka admits that he was indeed ready to sacrifice himself, so he suggests a compromise, saying they can all air their grievances later. For now, they should clean up, as they're all drenched in sweat, and Marina is still covered in Zarnag blood. While the girls bathe in the river, Yuka begins setting up camp, and the whole situation brings back fond memories from 6 months ago. Back then, Yuka was responsible for training Marina's team, and he was genuinely impressed by how quickly the girls were adapting to the life of adventurers. However, there were still a few areas that needed improvement. Marina had a tendency to be a bit clumsy, Silk was overly cautious, and Rain was extremely timid. Even so, based on how well they were progressing, Yuka would have gladly handed them their D-rank adventure licenses right then if it had been his decision. Later that night, the girls had set up their tent, gathered firewood, and placed alarms to alert them in case of a monster attack. As Yuka watched them back then, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, confident that they were destined to become exceptional adventurers. However, he never would have guessed that just a few days later, he would end up joining their party. The party returns to the guild, where they've been summoned to meet with the guild master, making the girls a bit anxious. They ask Yuka if this means they're in trouble, but he suspects the meeting is likely about the Zarnag they defeated. A mission of that caliber should have been classified as B rank, yet it was oddly marked as D rank, so it's clear that some investigation is in order. At that moment, the guild master of Benwood enters the room, and the girls, overwhelmed by his intimidating presence, immediately snap to attention. He approaches Yuka and demands an explanation, but Yuka knows he hasn't done anything wrong. He calmly tells Benwood that all the necessary details were already included in the report he submitted to the guild. Benwood isn't content with the objective report and insists on a detailed explanation. However, before continuing, Yuka tells him to drop the tough guy act because it's intimidating the girls. Marina tries to intervene, urging Yuka not to speak so casually to the guild master, given how powerful he is. But as it turns out, the guild master holds a great deal of respect for Yuka, so there's no need for any formalities between them. Benwood tells everyone to take a seat. While he already knows what happened in the forest, he's more interested in hearing Yuka's thoughts on the situation. Yuka explains that he suspects it might be the result of an overflow, which caused a monster far stronger than usual to appear. Benwood agrees with Yuka's assessment and promptly instructs his secretary to issue an emergency investigation quest to uncover the cause. Both Yuka and Benwood clearly understand the gravity of overflows, but Marina is clueless about what that means, so she asks Yuka for an explanation. Yuka explains that an overflow is a phenomenon triggered by a catalyst that causes monsters from a dungeon to spill out into the outside world. Normally, the monsters are bound to the dungeon by the mana flowing through the ground, but occasionally those restraints can break, allowing the monsters to escape and wreak havoc on the surrounding area. This could also be a warning sign of a potential dungeon stampede in the near future. The girls are familiar with dungeon stampedes and the devastation they bring, tearing through towns like a wildfire. If monsters as powerful as that Zarnag are already showing up, it means time is running short. Benwood is determined to conduct a thorough investigation to safeguard the people, but before proceeding, he offers a heartfelt apology to the girls for exposing them to such danger. The girls assure Benwood that there's no need to apologize, as they all made it out alive, though they admit that without Yuka, they wouldn't have stood a chance. That being said, even though Yuka carried much of the burden, their live stream demonstrated that the girls are skilled fighters in their own right. As a reward for their impressive performance against the Zarnag, Benwood decides to promote all of them to C rank. The promotion, however, comes with the condition that the girls have Yuka's assistance, given that he is a rank. Confused, Yuka points out that he's only B rank, but that's when Benwood informs him that he's being promoted as well. Everyone who watched the live stream witnessed the high-level prismatic missile spell he used against the Zarnag, making it clear that Yuka is deserving of the upgrade. Starting today, he is officially an A-rank adventurer. Afterwards, Yuka and the girls head downstairs to have a drink and congratulate each other on their promotions. While they are all together, Yuka pulls out the bag of coins he got as the reward for their quest and gives it to Silk to count out. Silk opens the bag, and she is shocked because she has never seen so many gold coins in one place before. Yuka explains that, although the quest was initially classified as D rank due to its level of difficulty, it was ultimately treated as a B rank quest. As a result, the payout is significantly higher than it would have been under the original ranking. Silk dumps all the coins onto the table to start counting, but she quickly notices a piece of paper at the bottom of the bag with Yuka's name on it. She hands it over, and Yuka opens it to find a note from Benwood apologizing for everything Yuka had to endure. Along with the note, there's a platinum coin included as a small bonus for Yuka. Since platinum coins are incredibly valuable, Yuka decides to add it to the party's funds. Once Silk finishes counting everything, she announces that they now have enough money to buy a house. Maria is so excited to hear that she jumps up and accidentally knocks the coins over. Silk is glad they reached their financial goal as well, but she feels a little bad about it since the only reason they got this much money was because of Yuka. While that may be true, Yuka tells Silk she doesn't have to think of it that way. They made him the leader of Clover, and it is natural for a leader to do whatever it takes to help out the group. As such, even if he played a major role in earning this money, it still belongs to all of them. The group continues celebrating late into the night, and at one point, Rain turns to Yuka and asks if he has a dream he wants to achieve. The question catches Yuka off guard, so he asks if there's a particular reason she's asking. Rain explains that, thanks to Yuka, they've just accomplished their goal of buying a house, so now she wants to know what his dream is so they can help him achieve it. Since she asked, Yuka shares that his dream is to conquer the deepest floors of the Achromatic Darkness dungeon. As soon as the girls hear this, they spit up their drinks in surprise because the dungeon is quite literally the most dangerous one out there. It even possesses an abyss gate, an artifact known to be a direct gateway to the underworld. Yuka says the abyss gate is precisely why he wants to conquer the Achromatic Darkness. Rain asks him if he intends to go through the abyss gate if he reaches it, but Yuka explains that he just wants to see what the edge of the world looks like. Yuka explains that his uncle once attempted to tackle the Achromatic Darkness dungeon and tried to reach the gate. Although he didn't succeed, Yuka told the story so often as a kid that he eventually decided he wanted to try it himself, even if he knows it's unlikely to ever happen. Marina loves the idea of Yuka's dream and suggests that they all venture into the Achromatic Darkness together to help him achieve it. Yuka, however, points out that it's not that simple. The dungeon is so dangerous that entering it requires government approval, and only an A-rank party can qualify for such permission. Even so, Rain thinks it's a great idea and suggests making it their party's next big goal. The others agree wholeheartedly, promising to work hard to help Yuka achieve his dream, though they know it won't be happening anytime soon. Meanwhile, Clover's streams have been steadily growing in popularity with each passing day. Currently, they're streaming a battle against an undead hand, and thanks to their impeccable teamwork, they managed to take it down using a lightning spell from Rain and a rock scroll from Yuka. That concludes the stream, so they wave to their fans, and everyone at the guild absolutely loves them all except the members of Thunderpike, who hate how popular Yuka has become. Barry thinks Yuka only looks impressive because he is in a team of newbies, but Simon actually heard that Yuka recently recently got promoted to a rank, so he might just be that good. Besides, Yuka's popularity isn't their biggest concern right now. Thunder Pike has been struggling with repeated failures on their quests lately, and Simon believes the issue lies with all the new recruits they've been hiring, who, in his words, always turn out to be incompetent fools. None of them ever last more than a day, but that couldn't possibly be because there's something wrong with their team. On the topic of their team, Simon asks why Jami isn't there. Camilla responds by explaining that Jami wasn't in the mood for a drink. Simon is furious, pointing out that ever since the mission where Jami was mauled by a wolf, she's been constantly dragging the team down. Meanwhile, Jami has locked herself in her room, watching videos of Yuka's live stream on repeat for hours. The other members of Thunder Pike are beginning to realize that Yuka might have been far more valuable to the team than they initially thought. Since Yuka left because of his low pay, they figure they could offer him a slightly higher cut to bring him back, and with Jami barely contributing these days, they could just reduce her share instead. A few hours later, Yuka and the others return to the guild to report the success of their mission. But as they arrive at the front door, they find Simon waiting there for Yuka. Seeing Simon again makes Yuka a little angry, so he tells the girls to head inside without him, and then he asks Simon what he wants. Simon gets to the point and says he is allowing Yuka the honor of rejoining Thunder Pike. Yuka can't believe the nonsense that just came out of Simon's mouth, but Simon tries to manipulate him by pointing out that Yuka's dream of reaching the Abyss Gate is only achievable if he's part of a rank party like Thunder Pike. On top of that, Simon mentions that ever since Yuka left, the team has been struggling to complete quests. Simon claims it's Yuka's responsibility to return and fix the situation. Yuka hears everything Simon has to say, but it's a shame he simply doesn't care. While they may have been childhood friends, that means nothing to Yuka after all the disrespect Simon has shown him. Deciding he wants nothing more to do with Simon, Yuka turns and walks inside, leaving Simon to deal with the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Bessio had been watching the entire interaction and appears to have a sinister idea brewing in his mind. Back inside, Yuka meets up with the girls, who immediately ask about the guy outside. Yuka explains that it was Simon, the leader of his old party. Upon hearing this, Marina becomes concerned that Yuka might rejoin Thunder Pike, but Yuka reassures her, as he said earlier, that nothing on Earth could ever convince him to return to that disaster of a party. Putting that aside, they still need to report their mission success to the guild, so the group heads to the reception desk. Once that's taken care of, they plan to grab some drinks to celebrate. The following day, Yuka gathers everyone for a meeting to inform the girls about a quest they have received. Marina, already eager and prepared to set out, is quickly told by Yuka to sit down and at least hear the details of the quest first. He explains that their party has been personally requested by Earthies. The girls are taken aback, as Earthies is the most renowned workshop in the country. In fact, Silk's bow was crafted there, making it a great honor to be specifically chosen by them. Still, the girls can't help but wonder why Earthies would specifically choose Clover out of all parties. Yuka clarifies that Earthies is introducing a new line of equipment for women, designed to be both fashionable and protective. Essentially, they want Marina, Silk, and Rain to clear a dungeon while wearing the new outfits as a way to promote the brand. Marina is in disbelief that they are actually going to be poster girls for a company as prestigious as Earthies, while Silk and Rain are already adjusting their hair in preparation. It's an incredible deal. They get paid to conquer a dungeon, and even get to keep the armor afterward. With that, they tell Yuka they're accepting the offer, and the group soon departs for the Aeon Ruins dungeon. When the day of the quest finally arrives, Yuka meets up with the girls inside the dungeon, where they have already changed into their new Earthies gear. He compliments them, saying they all look adorable, and adds that, beyond just appearance, the equipment is highly functional, making it a perfect fit for them. However, for some reason, Rain appears to be annoyed with him, though he has no idea why. As the group steps into the dungeon, Yuka explains that it is quite old and consists of only 4 floors. However, at the very bottom, there is an entrance leading to a separate dungeon, which is the one they need to clear to reach the main entrance of this second dungeon. Yuka informs them that they will have to take the stairs, but these stairs are extremely long. Hearing this, Marina suggests that instead of wasting time, they could just rappel down the middle with a rope to speed things up. Yuka acknowledges that, under normal circumstances, Marina would be right, and many have attempted that approach before. However, he explains that this dungeon has a distortion field that prevents anyone from straying off the designated paths. He warns them to be cautious and avoid getting caught in the field. Meanwhile, he can't help but notice that Rain still seems upset, prompting him to ask if he did something wrong. Rain remains silent, but the others know exactly why she's annoyed. They nudge Yuka, urging him to take a closer look at Rain's outfit. Yuka looks at Rain, trying to see if there's something he missed, and that's when he notices that she changed her ribbon bow color to blue instead of red today. Rain was upset that he hadn't complimented her on it, so Yuka tells her it looks good on her, and she feels a lot better. The group then makes their way down to the second floor, where Yuka, using his lantern, spots a trap up ahead. He quickly instructs the girls to step back while he handles it. Taking out a long stick, he carefully taps the trap, triggering a barrage of spears to shoot out from the ground, walls, and ceiling. It would have been a terrible way to meet their end, but now that the trap has been sprung, the path should be safe for them to proceed. Now, they have to carefully squeeze through the spears, so as they navigate the narrow gaps, Yuka checks in to see if anyone is struggling. Fortunately, thanks to the snug fit of their new armor, the girls manage to pass through without any issues. As they move further down the corridor, Yuka suddenly senses something ahead and promptly warns the girls to prepare for battle. The group suddenly finds themselves face to face with a pack of orcs, and the moment Silk lays eyes on them, generations of deep-seated hatred resurface in her mind. Yuka understands that orcs are the natural enemies of elves, but he urges Silk to stay calm so she doesn't act recklessly. His strategy is to strike first with powerful magic, followed by Marina engaging them with her sword, while Silk provides support from the rear. With everyone clear on the plan, Yuka casts his enchantment spells, while Rain begins preparing a fireball. Once her spell is ready, she launches it at the orcs, engulfing them in flames. Seizing the moment, Yuka follows up with a rock blast, as the orcs scramble to dodge the flying debris. Silk lands a precise shot to one of their necks, while another is crushed, leaving only two remaining. Marina rushes in just as the last two orcs charge forward, but Yuka quickly casts a paralyze and slow spell, hindering their movements. With this opening, Marina slices one clean in half, while Silk lands a precise shot to the other's neck. Marina then delivers the finishing blow by splitting the orc's head in two. With the battle finally over, Yuka approaches the fallen orcs to collect the magic stones, then turns to Silk, asking if she has calmed down now. Silk apologizes for her outburst, but she can't help but be filled with rage whenever she sees an orc. Yuka understands that she can't control her reaction to orcs since it's just a part of being an elf. Just then, Marina comes up to Yuka and tells him she just found something weird on one of the orcs' bodies. She hands it over, and after examining it, Yuka recognizes it as a memorandum of revelation scroll, an artifact capable of uncovering hidden abilities in those who use it. It's unusual for a low-ranked orc to possess something like this, but in its current damaged state, its value is significantly reduced. However, rather than selling it off, which would be a waste, Yuka decides that he will repair it and have one of the girls use it instead. Silk asks what would happen if one of them were to use the scroll, prompting Yuka to explain that it would unlock a hidden talent. For instance, it could grant a second job or possibly a new skill. Hearing this, Rain and Silk agree that once the revelation scroll is repaired, Marina should be the one to use it, since she currently only has one job. Marina is a little hesitant to accept since sword mages are rare, and she's not sure she has the potential to become one. Still, Yuka thinks it's worth a try anyway, since even if she doesn't get a second job, she might end up uncovering some sort of hidden ability. At that moment, a chest appears as their reward for defeating the orcs. After opening it, they continue onward until they reach the break room between floors. Inside the chest, They find a magic bag, which immediately sends Rain over the moon with excitement, especially since everyone agrees she should have it. Magic bags are particularly useful for those in support roles, making her the ideal choice. Yuka, however, notes that if they happen to find another one in the future, it would be best for Silk to have it, as it would allow her to carry more arrows. Once their break is over, everyone gets up. But before moving forward, Yuka decides to assess the team's losses and gains. He considers using one of his scrolls, but decides against it since his mana levels are still in good shape, and Marina feels completely fine. Silk used 5 arrows during the battle with the orcs, but she still has 20 remaining. As for Rain, she's ready to keep going. With everyone still in good condition, they proceed down to the 3rd floor. Yuka reminds everyone to stay on high alert, as even though this floor doesn't have a designated floor boss, they still need to be prepared for any potential attacks. He explains that there was once a door leading to the main dungeon, the abandoned city, but about 10 years ago, it mysteriously disappeared, allowing anyone to enter freely. In the past, the entrance was heavily guarded by multiple shadow stalkers. From what Yuka knows, these creatures resemble solid black mannequins with gleaming eyes. However, they haven't been sighted in years, so there's no way they'd encounter one here, or so he believes. However, there's a black mannequin with shiny eyes just staring at them menacingly from the 3rd floor. Marina asks if they should be concerned about that. That thing is definitely a shadow stalker, and Yuka thinks it's unbelievable that they are actually seeing one here, so he makes sure the recorder gets a good view of it. The shadow stalker may look creepy, but they don't have to worry for now since it's on the 3rd floor. There's no way it can cross the distortion field. However, the shadow stalker suddenly leaps down, effortlessly piercing through the distortion field as if it weren't even there. It seems they might be in serious trouble after all. Yuka immediately orders everyone to prepare for battle and pulls out a scroll of multi-enchant, enhancing the girls as much as possible. But despite all the buffs, the Shadow Stalker's first strike takes Marina down in a single hit. Rain quickly rushes to Marina's side to heal her, while Silk provides cover. Yet Yuka is still in shock. He can't believe the Shadow Stalker shattered his multi-enchant barrier so easily. The Shadow Stalker readies another attack, prompting Yuka to rush forward and cast a protection barrier on himself. However, the shadow effortlessly shatters it, leading Yuka to realize that its attacks must be specifically designed to break through barriers. Adjusting his strategy, he casts Blink Shadow on himself, allowing him to evade attacks entirely and get close enough to strike the shadow by surprise. But just as he's about to land a hit, the shadow suddenly turns and counters with a dark magic curse, leaving Yuka completely immobilized. It seems there might truly be no way to defeat it. The shadow then casts another curse, but Rain manages to block it with a holy shield, while Silk counterattacks with her dryad vines. While the shadow is busy, Rain tries to heal Yuka like she did with Marina, but to her horror, she discovers that Yuka isn't breathing. At the same time, the shadow slashes Silk across the back, and Marina manages to chase it off, but it's moving way too quickly for her to hit it. Seeing no other option, Rain decides to unleash a wide area spell to take the shadow down. She casts Ice Gravel, targeting the enemy, but before the attack can land, the shadow vanishes and reappears behind them, slashing both Marina and Rain across the back. Now, all the girls are seriously wounded, yet the shadow isn't finished. It proceeds to conjure dozens of Eclipse cannons, launching them directly at the group. This could have been their end, but at the last moment, Yuka returns, casting a light shield over them just in time to block the attack. He covers the floor in 1,000 trip spells so the shadow can't get away, and then he begins spamming every possible debuff effect he can cast to weaken it, while also casting buffs on the girls to heal them. Now that the girls are back in fighting shape, Silk wraps the shadow in her vines, granting Rain enough time to cast her undead spell to erase the shadow. With the battle finally over, Marina, overwhelmed with relief that Yuka is still alive, throws her arms around him in a tight hug. However, Yuka quickly points out that her embrace is so strong, it's bringing him dangerously close to dying all over again. Once Marina releases him, Yuka sincerely thanks her, acknowledging that if she hadn't spotted the Shadow Stalker when she did, they would have been caught off guard, and that would have meant certain death for the entire group. He then turns to Rain and asks for her thoughts on the shadow. Rain explains that while it was undead, its mana was completely erratic. making it feel as though its very existence was unnatural. Moreover, it shouldn't have been able to bypass the distortion field, which strongly suggests that it was the result of a dungeon overflow. She then asks Yuka what he thinks they should do next, since they've already reached the bottom floor. He proposes that they should at least complete their quest before making their way back up. In that case, Marina asks if they should inform everyone of the Shadow Stalker with a stream, but Yuka would rather not since they are wearing Earthies' unreleased equipment line, so he doesn't want to show it to the public without permission from the client. Yuka suggests they finish the quest quickly so they can get out of here. They continue forward, making their way down the corridor until they reach the door leading to the abandoned city. According to legend, people once inhabited this place long ago. However, their quest only requires them to reach the gate, not venture inside. So, after touching it to fulfill the mission's requirements, they turn around and begin their journey back to the surface. After making it back, Yuka submits his report to the guild. Once he's finished, he steps outside to meet up with the girls, who have been waiting for him. Silk immediately asks how it went, and Yuka explains that he submitted the footage they recorded and informed the guild about the Shadow Stalker. Since the guild will likely want to interview them about it later, he suggests that they take the next 2 days off and stay in the town of Qualto to rest. Marina loves the idea and excitedly asks Yuka if he'd like to go on a date with all of them. Silk, unfamiliar with the city, was hoping Yuka could show her around, while Rain is eager to explore and see all the artifacts the town has to offer. Seeing no reason to turn them down, Yuka agrees to spend the day with them. Thunder Pike keeps embarking on adventures in an effort to maintain their standing as an rank party. However, Barry has been grumbling a lot about their rations, as he was used to having good food whenever Yuka was around. Simon points out that there's no point in complaining about it now, so he suggests they keep moving forward. He then checks with everyone to make sure they still have enough mana and potions. Barry responds that he didn't bother buying any potions after all. Why waste money on healing potions when he can just have Camilla heal him instead? However, Camilla doesn't have unlimited mana. Simon tells them to cut the argument short and asks Jami to get their stream running so they can move forward. While she's working on it, Barry suddenly starts calling her weak and useless for no reason, and the others join in. Lately, they've been caught in an uncontrollable downward spiral, and with Yuka no longer around to take the blame for their problems, they've started taking it out on Jami instead. Unfortunately, there's nothing she can do about it. Although this mission ended in yet another failure, when they return to the guild, the receptionist warns them that if they continue failing like this, they risk being demoted. She tells Simon that his party might have a better chance if they take on slightly easier quests so they can actually succeed for once. Personally, she suggests they aim for C-rank quests next time. Simon is furious that she would say something like that to an A-rank adventurer, but she points out that he hasn't been delivering A-rank results, so he won't be getting any special treatment. Once again, Simon tries to shift the blame for his failures onto others, claiming it's the guild's fault for not introducing them to someone like Yuka, someone he could manipulate into doing all the heavy lifting for the team. However, the receptionist couldn't care less about his excuses and dismisses him without giving him anything else to do. Thunder Pike sits at a table, brooding, while Jami chooses a separate one since she no longer gets along with the rest of the group. Barry is still fuming over the receptionist's warning about their possible demotion, but Simon manages to calm him down, admitting that she had a point. They haven't been performing as well as they once did, so maybe taking on A-rank missions is a bit too much for them at the moment with just the 4 of them. However, if Simon thinks their lack of a 5th member is a problem, then Camilla tells him to hurry up and find a new member for their party since that's his job as the leader. Simon knows Camilla is right, but even if he finds someone else, there's no way he would get someone as good as Yuka was. So Barry asks him if they can just bring Yuka back to Thunder Pike. However, Simon had already tried that, and Yuka refused. So if he wants to bring Yuka back, he'll need to find a way to convince him to overlook the years of gaslighting he was subjected to. That's why Simon suggests they take on a mission in the Achromatic Darkness dungeon, since conquering it had always been Yuka's dream, driven by his desire to find an abyss gate. Simon believes they can lure Yuka back into their party by pretending to be interested in in clearing the dungeon. Since only a rank parties are permitted inside, there's no way Yuka could attempt it with the newbie girls in his group. Barry thinks it's a brilliant idea and quickly agrees with Simon's plan, while Jami just sits there, wondering how she ended up stuck with a bunch of losers like them. Meanwhile, Yuka and the girls are heading out in town, and while walking to their destination, Yuka tells them that he heard the Aeon Ruins dungeon was temporarily closed for an investigation. Although it shouldn't be surprising since a shadow stalker did show up for the first time in 10 years. As they continue walking down the street, they eventually come across the man they were supposed to meet, who then takes them to inspect a house they're considering buying. Mr. Monday gives them a tour, and the place looks quite nice, but Yuka isn't convinced it's the right choice for them. He points out that single-story houses are easy targets for burglaries, and with so many windows, it would be difficult to prevent people from looking inside something that's a major privacy concern, especially since the girls will be living there. In that case, Mr. Monday offers to show them a different property and leads the group to a second house. This one was newly remodeled into a family home and has private bedrooms on the second floor, along with an underground storage space and roof access. Marina thinks this place is great, and Yuka likes it too, but he still hasn't made a decision on it yet, so he asks Mr. Monday if he could put a hold on this house for a little while. Mr. Monday tells them he'll keep the house on the market in case Yuka changes his mind, but for now, he has one last property to show them. Yuka and the others follow him to the next house. But as they walk, Yuka starts feeling a bit uneasy. Rain picks up on this and asks if something is wrong. He assures her it's nothing major, but admits that Thunder Pike's base is nearby, and he's a little concerned he might run into them while he's in the area. As soon as the girls hear this, they tell Mr. Monday they don't want to see the last house. They don't want to risk living in the same neighborhood as Thunder Pike, so it could be a 5-story mansion for all they care. They don't want it. Marina suggests they just buy the last house they saw since that one was pretty good, and Yuka agrees. That same day, they get everyone's belongings moved into the new house. Yuka offers to help the girls settle in and asks if they've decided which rooms they want. However, they were actually waiting for him to pick his room first. Confused, Yuka asks if they're implying that they want him to live with them, and that's exactly what they mean after all. This is supposed to be their party's base, and they wouldn't have been able to afford the house without Yuka's help. So, of course, they want him to stay with them. Yuka hesitates at the idea of living under the same roof as the girls, but Marina points out that when they camp during their adventures, he has no problem sleeping right next to them, so this really shouldn't be any different. It's hard to argue with that logic. So Yuka agrees to move in, but not without setting a few ground rules. He reminds them that he's still a man, so they need to actually use their door locks when changing or doing anything private. He just wants to avoid getting caught in any embarrassing situations, and as long as everyone respects each other's privacy, there shouldn't be any problems. With that settled, they take their seats at the lunch table, sharing a meal and raising a toast to their future as Clover. However, Yuka notices that Rain seems somewhat distracted, so he glances over at the TV. To his surprise, a news report is covering a party currently exploring the Achromatic Darkness dungeon. The announcer explains that Thunder Pike was granted permission by the guild to conduct an investigation inside the dungeon, and that they've apparently joined forces with another party, all with the goal of reaching the Abyss Gate. Hearing that Thunder Pike is chasing after his dream feels like a huge slap in the face to Yuka, and the girls assume he must be really upset. However, he insists that he's fine. After all, it's not a competition, and when he eventually takes on the Achromatic dungeon, he wants to do it with Clover. He couldn't care less if Thunder Pike gets there first. He just wants to forget about them and focus on finishing their meal. But before he can do that, he receives a message from the guild informing him that he's being summoned. He and Rain go to see what this is about, and they are informed that a party has specifically requested Yuka's help on an upcoming mission of theirs. Yuka is curious about the request at first, but then he sees that it is from Thunder Pike, so he immediately rejects it and goes on with his day. However, just a few minutes later, Simon is notified that Yuka has declined the request. Frustrated, he goes out of his way to track Yuka down and demand an explanation. Expecting something like this to happen, Yuka calmly turns to face him. Without hesitation, Simon demands to know why Yuka refused their request. Yuka tells him there's no particular reason behind his decision, he just has no interest in working with Thunder Pike under any circumstances, even if it involves his dream. He's actually a bit surprised that Simon even remembers his goal of finding an abyss gate, but regardless, he has no intention of getting involved. With that, he simply wishes Simon the best of luck on his mission. Simon tries to guilt Yuka into reconsidering by saying he already started making preparations around Yuka's participation, but that sounds like a Simon problem, so why should he care? In the first place, it was incredibly rude to send a spot request to someone who is already in an active party, and as long as it is a request, Yuka has every right to refuse for whatever reason he chooses. Simon grows furious and accuses Yuka of being in the wrong for abandoning Thunder Pike, but Yuka has finally had enough. He snaps back, shouting that Simon is the real one at fault here. Back when he was part of Thunder Pike, everything from pre-quest preparations to research and even intel gathering was dumped entirely on his shoulders, and not once did Simon ever show any appreciation for all the effort he put in. All Simon ever did was use him, so, as far as Yuka is concerned, their friendship is over. Simon is stunned and asks Yuka what he's supposed to do now, since if Thunder Pike fails another quest, they'll be demoted again. That's not Yuka's problem to deal with, so he takes Rain's hand and walks away. 2 weeks later, Yuka meets with the guild master, who has some unfortunate news to share. It turns out that a dungeon overflow is indeed happening, as several other incidents have occurred across the country in addition to what Yuka's party experienced in Aeon. Given the situation, the Royal Academy couldn't ignore the possibility of a dungeon stampede, which is likely why they approved Thunder Pike's request to investigate the achromatic darkness. With that said, Benwood wants to nominate Yuka and the rest of Clover for an investigation quest in the achromatic darkness. Yuka immediately tells Benwood he can't accept the quest because there's no way a C-rank party like Clover can do a job like this. Besides, even if Thunder Pike isn't reliable, there are other A-rank parties included in the achromatic dungeon investigation. However, the guild master informs him that the other parties have grown tired of Thunder Pike's deception and have withdrawn from the mission. In fact, it seems that Thunder Pike never even intended to go through with the mission in the first place, as they haven't submitted a formal application for it. The guild master then takes out a logbook and presents it to Yuka, but Yuka immediately recognizes what it is: the only recorded conquest log from the last expedition into the achromatic dungeon, and within it lies undeniable proof of the Abyss Gate's existence. That's exactly why Benwood wants Yuka to do the investigation, because he is passionate about the Abyss Gate, and if it's him, any reports he makes can be completely trusted. He isn't asking Yuka to conquer the entire dungeon, he just wants him to take a look inside. But to do that, Yuka would have to fight his way through the dungeon, and he thinks that would be too risky. The guild master understands Yuka's concerns, which is why he's offering him something for the quest: a scroll of exit. With this, Yuka can instantly leave the dungeon whenever he wants. Hoping to ease his doubts, Benwood asks him to reconsider. Just then, the receptionist walks in and hands Yuka the official request form for the mission. According to the document, he will be joining a party called King of Welmelia, and for the duration of the mission, his party will be granted provisional A-rank status. This is starting to sound like a really big deal, so Yuka says he needs to talk to his party members about it before making a decision. After getting home, Yuka tells the girls about the request and tells them that he's actually thinking of turning it down. The girls are shocked that he would turn down such a major opportunity, and while Yuka acknowledges that taking part would be a huge boost for their party, he doesn't believe they're ready yet. There are still too many gaps in their experience and preparations. However, while their lack of experience isn't something they can fix overnight, Silk reminds Yuka that they can still take care of all the necessary preparations before the mission starts. Rain asks Yuka if he's afraid of something, and until now, he hadn't really thought about it, but he realizes that he is. He's terrified of losing the girls if they take on such a dangerous mission, and that's the last thing he ever wants to happen. The girls feel the same way about him, but they reassure Yuka that they'll do everything in their power to return safely. He just needs to trust that they can take care of themselves. themselves. Yuka comes to the realization that he was being excessively cautious and expresses his apologies to the girls for doubting them. They all come to an agreement to tackle the achromatic dungeon together. Later that day, the group returns to the guild to inform Benwood that they have decided to accept the quest. However, after discussing it among themselves, they conclude that having an additional member might be beneficial, so they ask if he can recommend a skilled scout to join them. The receptionist had anticipated this request, so she already had someone in mind. This is Nen, the daughter of one of the receptionist's friends. However, after taking a joke too far, she ended up being banished from her homeland. The receptionist took her in and helped her turn her life around. Nen introduces herself as a former Fursai thief, but now she holds the rank of C-rank ninja. She assures the group that she will be a valuable asset to the team and asks to be recruited as their scout. With the team prepared, Benwood and Mammer take the lead, guiding them down into the basement of the guild, where the entrance to the achromatic dungeon remains concealed. Silk is taken aback, having never imagined that the dungeon's entrance would be directly beneath the guild. The receptionist then clarifies that the Adventurers Guild was deliberately constructed over the achromatic dungeon as a safeguard to keep its entrance sealed. Putting that aside, before Yuka and the others step inside, there's something Benwood needs to inform them about. The other rank party originally assigned to this investigation ended up withdrawing at the last moment, meaning that Thunder Pike is currently the only party inside. Aware of how Yuka feels about Thunder Pike, the guildmaster figured he should give him a heads up, as there's a chance he might cross paths with them. And on the topic of Thunder Pike, the guild is actively looking into them for fraud, as there are accusations that Simon has been misusing the funds allocated for the mission. Regardless, Benwood simply asks Yuka to keep things civil if he happens to encounter Thunder Pike, since they can't afford to have adventurers clashing with each other inside the dungeon. With that, the dungeon gate swings open, and the group prepares to start their investigation. However, just before they step inside, Benwood reminds them that their task is simply to observe, meaning there's no need for them to go out of their way to fight monsters or clear the dungeon. Yuka and the others acknowledge the instructions, then begin their live stream and greet all their viewers. Yuka welcomes everyone and announces that today, Clover will be entering the achromatic dungeon for the very first time, with every moment being streamed live. Since Nen is the scout, Yuka hands her a lantern and a compass artifact to guide the way, making her job significantly easier. Nen then informs the group that there are no monsters in sight and that the wind compass is pointing in this direction. With that, she puts on an invisibility cloak and dashes ahead to scout the area. While Nen is away, Silk takes the opportunity to ask Yuka how he feels about finally venturing into the achromatic dungeon. However, to his surprise, he admits that he's not as excited as he expected to be. That said, the mission has only just begun, and Marina is confident that things will get more exciting as they go. Silk, on the other hand, is thrilled to be here. She originally became an adventurer purely for the money, but after hearing Yuka speak about his dream, she became captivated by the idea of adventuring for something greater than just wealth. After a short while, Nen returns and reports that she has confirmed the path they need to take, though she finds this place incredibly strange. The route she mentioned leads to a door floating in the middle of a forest. With that, Yuka and the others step through it and venture deeper into the dungeon. As they continue walking, Yuka brings up that he heard Thunder Pike entered the dungeon 2 weeks ago and is currently on the 8th floor, meaning the chances of running into them for now are pretty low. He then reminds the girls that their mission is simply to determine if there's anything unusual about the dungeon, not to clear it. With that in mind, he suggests they avoid any battles whenever possible. Before long, they find their path obstructed by a bizarre chimera, with no way to bypass it. It seems that, despite their intentions, a battle is unavoidable. Since Yuka has never encountered a creature like this before, he isn't willing to take any risks and immediately begins devising an attack strategy. He instructs Rain to prepare a compact fire spell and asks Silk to aim her arrows at the monster's head. As for Marina, he wants her to use this while she usually fights with a sword. Yuka prefers to take the monster down as quickly as possible, making the crossbow the better choice, though a bit disappointed since she was eager to use her sword after acquiring her new samurai job. Marina admits that a crossbow is pretty great too. With everyone clear on the plan, Yuka goes all in, immediately casting his prismatic missile spell. Just as the monster begins its charge. He fires, followed by Marina's crossbow shot, which pierces straight through its chest. Seizing the opportunity, Rain launches her flame spell directly into the hole, causing the creature to burn from the inside. Silk then delivers the finishing blow with a few well-placed arrows to its head. Nen is impressed by how swiftly they managed to take it down, and with the monster defeated, the team can now proceed to the safe room. After reaching the safe room, Yuka suggests they take a break and ends the stream. He then asks everyone to report their losses, but aside from the arrows used in the battle against the Chimera, everyone remains fully equipped, relieved that the team is still in good shape. Yuka turns his attention to the next matter at hand, the treasure chest. They're definitely going to open it, but Yuka hesitates, wondering whether they should stream it or not. Silk notes that if the chest contains valuable loot, some people might not take it well that a C-rank party like theirs managed to claim it. She raises a valid point, so Yuka decides they should open it off camera and gives Nen the signal to pick the lock. She follows Yuka's instructions and begins picking the lock, quickly noticing that a trap has been set within it. However, that's not a problem. Her skills are more than enough to bypass it. After some careful work, Nen successfully opens the chest, and the group is astonished to find it filled with dazzling gems. Yuka then instructs Silk to hold onto the jewels and gold for now. As she stores them in her magic bag, Yuka peers inside the chest to check if there are any artifacts hidden among the treasure. He's not sure why some jewels were left behind in the chest, but among them, Yuka spots a ring artifact that looks quite promising, along with a strange black cube. However, when he tries to appraise it, he gets no information, which leaves him puzzled. The reason, as it turns out, is that the artifact doesn't have any attributes yet. Finding it intriguing, Yuka decides to report its discovery to Benwood before attempting to use it himself. As for the ring, Yuka figures it would be perfect for Rain, since it's an artifact that helps keep its wearer calm, and it's already doing its job. She only panicked a little when Yuka got down on one knee and slipped the ring onto her finger. They keep moving through the dungeon, and before long, Nen manages to locate the staircase leading to the second floor. Yuka praises her for doing an excellent job as their scout, but Nen insists that it's all thanks to the wind compass artifact he lent her. It helps her track the staircase by following the air currents inside the dungeon. Yuka is a little surprised. He had assumed most adventurers used similar artifacts to navigate, but since he owns so many, it just feels normal to him. After reaching the second floor safe room, Yuka asks everyone to share any strange things they've noticed so far. Silk points out that the scenery seems to have changed in some areas, and then there was that bizarre fish-headed creature. However, the most puzzling thing of all was finding a treasure chest in the first floor safe room. That didn't make sense to Yuka, as treasure chests are typically only found on the deeper floors, and the value of the loot inside is usually tied to the floor's level of danger. So, discovering all those gems along with two valuable artifacts just doesn't add up. All of this is more than enough reason to be suspicious, and to be on the safe side, they probably shouldn't risk venturing too deep just yet. With that in mind, Yuka suggests they head back for the day. The mission has been a resounding success. They managed to gather plenty of information, discovered some intriguing artifacts, and, most importantly, didn't suffer any losses. Unfortunately, Yuka's good mood is quickly spoiled when he ends up running into Thunder Pike. Yeah, he was really hoping he'd never have to see their faces again, and, unsurprisingly, they haven't changed at all. Barry and Camilla immediately start berating him for being ungrateful, while Jami lingers in the back, clearly trying to stay out of her teammates' nonsense. Simon then steps forward and tells Yuka that since Clover is down here, he's feeling generous and is willing to form an alliance with them. Of course, that means Yuka needs to hand over all the data and valuable loot they collected during their expedition. Yuka can't believe the sheer audacity of Simon to assume he'd ever agree to that, but Barry, with a smug grin, chimes in, saying that since Yuka's party is only C rank, it's natural for them to team up with an A rank party. In fact, Yuka should feel grateful that they're even making such an offer. The live stream is still running, meaning all of Yuka's viewers are witnessing his argument with Simon in real time, and they can already tell things are about to get interesting. Simon keeps running his mouth, spewing nonsense, and even goes as far far as demanding that Yuka give him full credit for any information he uncovered. Yuka is already fed up with Simon's nonsense, but before he can even respond, Silk beats him to it. She calls Simon shameless for trying to take advantage of others, but instead of addressing her words, Simon, Barry, and Camilla reveal their prejudice against dark elves. They sneer at her, calling her a filthy follower of the dark god, and claiming that a savage like her has no right to speak in their presence. That was the final straw for Yuka. They can insult him all they want, but the moment they disrespect a member of his precious family, someone isn't walking away from this. Simon attempts to minimize both his own and the other's blatant racism, but Yuka is completely serious about his threat. He declares that he would rather die than ever work with him again, not wanting to spend another moment near Simon. He informs everyone in Clover that they are leaving and turns to walk away, leaving the three scumbags seething with rage. Jami is visibly uncomfortable, and keep in mind, all of this was captured on Yuka's livestream, meaning a large audience just witnessed Thunder Pike's openly racist behavior, and it's only a matter of time before they face cancellation. 2 days later, Thunderpike is called into a meeting with the guild master, Benwood, and he tells them that several complaints have been lodged against them in the past few days. One is from their sponsors, claiming that Thunderpike is misusing the funds that were allocated to them for the mission. 2 civil rights complaints from the Council of Elves and Welmelia for being openly racist towards Silk, and 1 from the guild's headquarters. Benwood asks Simon if he has anything to say for himself, but unfortunately, Simon lacks even the slightest bit of common sense. Instead, he insists that he did nothing wrong. In fact, he believes that Clover was at fault for allowing their filthy, savage elf to speak to him that way. However, before he can even finish that sentence, Simon takes a well-deserved punch to the face. The guild master is livid at Simon's complete lack of remorse, but Simon can't grasp why Benwood is making such a fuss over a single savage elf. To shut him up, Benwood hurls a dagger dangerously close to Simon's face, and since Simon is clearly too dense to understand the situation on his own, Benwood spells it out for him, and a rank party officially recognized by the Kingdom of Welmelia was just caught openly displaying racism toward a dark elf, tarnishing the dignity of the kingdom. Simon believes the guild master is blowing things out of proportion over what he sees as just a minor dispute between adventurers, but Benwood grabs him by the neck and makes it clear this little argument could end up jeopardizing the kingdom's relationship with the elves. So here's how it's going to go. Benwood demands that Simon and the others immediately issue a public apology on a live stream, and he'd better be ready to lose his adventurer's license or possibly even face exile from the kingdom altogether. Simon is beginning to grasp just how serious this situation is, so he tries to negotiate, arguing that if Benwood exiles them, there will be no one left to complete the achromatic dungeon investigation. But the guild master shuts him down immediately, assuring him that they'll manage just fine without Thunder Pike. Unlike them, Clover has already demonstrated their ability to handle themselves and cooperate effectively in high-risk situations, and for the duration of this mission, they have been provisionally granted a rank status. Simon is left stunned upon discovering that Clover has been granted a rank status. Benwood, having no interest in wasting any more time on him, orders Simon to leave his office and get started on that apology stream. But Simon can't believe this is actually happening to him, and he has no intention of apologizing because in his mind, he did nothing wrong. Instead, he shifts the blame onto Yuka, convinced that everything unfolded because of his stream, and now, all he can think about is getting his revenge. Just then, a voice calls out to Simon from around the corner, offering a plan to not only help him regain his status, but also get revenge on Yuka and Clover. Simon pauses for a moment, intrigued by what this person has to say. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.